Welcome to the Base Talk podcast. I am your host, Jacob Billingsley, owner and founder of Base Sports Performance in Hernando, Mississippi. In this episode, we are going to be discussing should pitchers take time off from throwing. All right. Welcome back to the podcast. So, as I mentioned today, we're going to be talking about should pitchers take time off from throwing. Before we begin, I think it's important to define who are we talking to first off, and second off, what does time off actually mean? So, personally, I like to put these into four different buckets. So the first one is going to be our athletes that are, let's say, below the age of 14. We're talking to our middle school athletes and younger. All right. The second bucket is going to be our high school athletes that are going to be between the ages of, let's say, 15 to 18, 15 to 19, something like that. And then, of course, we have our college athletes, and then we have our professional athletes. So those are our four buckets that we're going to talk to today. The first bucket is, again, those athletes that are, let's say, 14 years old and younger. And obviously, before we begin with this age group, I want to obviously say that we do understand, of course, the maturity level of these athletes, especially as you get to the 12, 13, 14-year-old ages, can drastically change. So if we're talking to kind of the broad audience here, a general recommendation is what I'm going to make here. Obviously, everything is case by case. From what we're going to talk to today, things do change. It's not an all-in-one recommendation here, but if we're talking to the majority of this age group, this is our recommendation. So as we're talking about those athletes that are 14-year-old and younger, a lot of those athletes are still playing multiple sports, which I think is a great thing. And I recommend that. I like playing multiple sports. I think that it helps develop multiple athletic qualities that, if you're just playing baseball, yes, we're doing, let's say you're a shortstop. Yes, you're doing lateral change of direction. You're having to do some acceleration work. Obviously, there's a ton of rotation happening. But I really like athletes in this age group to play multiple sports to build those athletic qualities, especially the younger ones, right? Like if we're talking, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, all of those athletes, they need to be playing multiple sports. They need to be developing those athletic qualities. That way, as they get older, they've built those athletic qualities and now they're more athletic and they're not just kind of a robot playing the same sport over and over. And also, another thing to note that is worth mentioning and worth, talking about and discussing is a lot of times athletes that specialize at an early age like that, they get burnt out by the time they get to high school, right? They've only done one sport, they've only done hitting lessons, and they've only done pitching lessons, and they've only done travel baseball every weekend in the summer, and and they've never got to go to the lake with their friends. And I just think that is a recipe for burnout, right? You've seen it time and time again. We still see it. I see it when I played with guys. I see it obviously in our college, our pro, honestly, even in some of the high school and younger, is that it's easy to get burnt out if that's our only focus, right? So in this age group, 14-year-old and younger, I really, really like the multiple sports. Let's develop those athletic qualities. And obviously, as we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth here, is all of these age groups, all of these four buckets that I briefly discussed, need to be in that quality strength and performance program year round. Obviously, we'll come back to that in a little bit of why that's important. But again, just for an athletic quality standpoint, they need to be exposed to different planes of motion. They need to be exposed to different timings of games. They need to be exposed to different eyesights and different objectives and different competitions and things like that. We need to develop that athletic quality. We need to develop the competitive drive within them at that age. So that's pretty much the recommendation there. If we're going to put a timeline on it, I really, I feel pretty comfortable to say I recommend that anywhere from 3 to 4 months off, right, of playing baseball. So again, talking about what does that actually mean? Let's define what does take time off mean. So in this age group, I think that we should put the ball down, we should put the bat down, take 3 months, go play soccer, go play basketball, develop that change of direction, develop the springiness that it takes to play both of those sports. Maybe you're even playing pickleball with mom or dad. You're developing different qualities. You're building athleticism within that. Again, this is not taking off, strength and performance programs, this is a year-round thing, the strength and performance, as we'll go into. But from a throwing standpoint, my general recommendation for this age group is take anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks. Put the ball down, put the bat down. Maybe you still play around in the backyard with your friends, cool. But if we're taking a 12-year-old and we're playing 11 months out of the year or 10 months out of the year even, I think that there is probably going to be a strong possibility that we're getting burnout or injury risk as we get older. So as we move into that second bucket, obviously that's going to be our high school age athletes. That's going to be anywhere from the 15 to 18-year-olds, 15 to 19-year-olds. The thing that I want to note here is that the majority, again, if we're talking general here, broadly, the majority of these athletes that are between these ages are more physically mature, right? So their stress levels are going to be higher on the mound. The stress levels are going to be higher, as they play the game because they are stronger and they can produce more force, right? Generally, they're more athletic. They've built those athletic qualities, and their stress levels are high, again, because they can produce that force. These are the athletes that when we take time off, they need a dedicated build-up period. And, those 14-year-old and younger do as well. Don't get me wrong. All of these, everybody that throws needs a dedicated build-up period. But this is where it really gets where it's kind of not an option with this age group. You can't just, take 12 weeks off and then play catch in the backyard with dad or brother for 2 weeks and then go throw a bullpen on week 3 because you have a tryout. That's not how that works with this age group anymore. So, there needs to be, again, dedicated build-up period. So what I like to do and what we structure with our throwers and our pitchers at base is that we're working backwards. So let's say it's October, mid-October, and we are looking at our next game happening mid-March, right? So let's say it's between March 20th and April 1st. Let's just say that's, maybe we haven't got our schedule yet, but we have a pretty good idea that that's around the time it's going to be. So we're looking at that and we're going to work backwards. There needs to be a couple different phases to build up those high school athletes to get ready for that timeline. So the 3 phases that we take our pitchers through, and that we take obviously a different amount of time in each phase, depending on the athlete, depending on their maturity level, depending on injury history and what their timeline looks like. But the first one is going to be the capacity building phase, right? This is from, we haven't thrown, and let's say with this age group, let's say that, we take 3 to 6 weeks off. Again, it's going to be case by case. As you get older and as you get more advanced, of course, it's going to be more case by case, and we need to obviously sit down and map that out with you. But the general recommendation there is 3 to 6 weeks of absolute no throw. And then, of course, we're spending the majority of our time off, quote unquote, in the rebuild phase to get ready for the season, or to get ready for that first outing or that first bullpen or that first tryout or whatever that looks like. So phase 1 is capacity building phase. We're building the general capacity of the tissues. We're building capacity of the musculature. We're just getting the arm going from 0 and slowly ramping it up to where we feel pretty good and pretty confident. That volume is going to slightly increase. The intensity is pretty much going to stay the same in this phase, where we're not really going to raise the intensity much. Yes, it's going to improve just a little bit, but we're not going to focus on the intent. We're mainly just going to focus on increasing the volume and the capacity of the muscles and the tendons there. So moving into the second phase is the intensity phase. So as we've gone through the capacity phase, we've rebuilt the capacity. We've got our volume up for the number of throws that we're making. Maybe we're working out to, whatever is considered long toss to you, or whatever is considered kind of like max distance for you. Could be 120 feet like our pro guys. A lot of them only go to about 100 to 120 feet. Some of them love to long toss. Some of the high school and college kids like to long toss. Whatever that is, that happens in the capacity phase, where we're building the distance pretty much for how far we're throwing. All right. The intent phase is when we are starting to slowly build the intensity, of course. So maybe we're starting around that 70% intensity, 75% intensity on a couple of days a week. So maybe, if you're on a 5-day-a-week throwing program with us, maybe on a Tuesday and a Friday, we're doing just a couple shuffle pull downs, nice and easy at the very end, between 70 and 75%. So you would do your normal catch play, back to, let's just use 120 feet, for example. Normal catch play, maybe it's 40, 50 throws, between 45 and 100 and 120 feet. And then once we get towards the end and we're getting ready to be done, maybe we take a couple shuffles to where it's a shuffle and then we're doing a 70% pull down to our partner, which is really just, instead of the throw being like on an arc, like a rainbow, maybe it's just on a less of an arc, right? So maybe it's slightly above head height at the peak. Maybe it's, a little bit higher than that, whatever 70, 75% is to you. And then from there, we'll do that twice a week for the next couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, probably, depending on the timeline, to get that intensity increased to getting close to that 90, 95-ish% for a couple of throws. Obviously, if you need some more help with that, shoot us a text or an email and we can help you structure that throwing program, because the amount of throws is going to matter, that how long you do that is going to matter, and on which days you do that is also going to matter depending on what you're doing. So if you need more detailed help with that, just let us know and we can help out. But just for the sake of this podcast here, we're gonna say we're going 5 days a week. Tuesday and Friday is our higher intent days. And we do that through the whole month of the intent phase. All right. So, maybe week 1, we go 70, 75%. Week 2, we go 75 to 80%. Week 3, we go 80 to 90%. Week 4, we go 90 to 95%. So maybe it looks something like that only on those 2 high intent days. The other 3 days of the throwing program are just a nice, easy, light catch of pretty much the same thing we did in the capacity phase 1. All right. And then obviously phase 3 is going to be when we're closer to the season. We're within, 3 to 5 weeks probably of needing to be on the mound. And now this phase 3 is the mound blend phase, right? So we took our capacity phase and turned it into an intensity phase. We took the intensity phase and now we're translating that to the mound, right? So that's what we call our mound phase. So maybe again, it's still on the same 2 days, the Tuesday and the Friday. Maybe we do, 2 or 3 shuffle pull downs, and then we get on the mound and we start to blend that movement and blend that intensity onto the mound down the slope, right? We're working on the timing of the hips. We're working on the timing of, the shoulders, the timing of the back leg, the timing of the arm, extension, whatever it is. This is where we need to work on timing and getting things ready for that first outing. So again, it's pretty similar to the intensity, but now instead of doing it on a flat ground or, just on the field, we're taking those last 10, 15 throws-ish, maybe hopping up on the mound for that Tuesday and that Friday, and we're going, again, we're starting pretty much at that same thing again. We're going 70, 75% intent on those first few throws. Let's say we're going over a 4-week period here. First week is 70, 75%. Second week is 75 to 80, 85%. Week 3 is, 80 to 90%. Week 4 is going to be pretty much that max intent phase there, where we're, maybe we're giving them 20 pitches and we're allowing them to go, 10, 12, 14 pitches to where they're warming up from, that 70% up to about that 90%. And then maybe on that week 4, the very last quote unquote mound day before they pitch, maybe they're going, 8, 10, 15 pretty hard, high intent throws there between, 90 and 100, right? So again, in a general stance, that's kind of what we would look at depending on the time frame. And that's kind of how that buildup works. But this is the age group, when you get 15 and older, is obviously the age where we have to be on a structured build-up program, because again, the intensity is a lot higher. The force, there's a lot more force produced with this age group, and obviously there's a lot more at stake here. As we get to the college and the pro, the college is a little bit tricky just because their seasons are so different from each other. So let's just use a normal, again, general here, but let's say that we have an athlete that comes back from, they're coming into the fall, all right? We have fall ball that goes, let's say, mid-September through November 1st, just as an example, right? So they're throwing at a high intent on a mound from mid-September to November 1st, all right? then let's say that they're giving them, hey, November 1st through, mid-December, we're going to take off. We're going to give you a few weeks to build back up. But then they're allowing them to come back and they're saying, hey, we need you to be ready for a bullpen, January 15th, let's say. Well, if we're taking, the time off between November 1st and maybe early December, mid-December, that's a 4, 5, 6 week period that we're talking about that we're taking off. If we start back on the mound early December and we're expected to be, high intent early mid-January, we're going to need every bit of that 6+ weeks to go through, these 3 phases, right? So it's a little bit harder to structure that throwing program from a safety standpoint as far as like how much time we need to actually re-ramp back up. Because the worst possible thing you can do is take a short shutdown, 3 to 4 weeks, and then have a short re-ramp of 3 to 4 weeks. That's the worst possible thing you can do. That's how injuries happen. That's how the intensity, goes from all to nothing and then back up to all really quickly. Those stress levels go from 0 to 100 really fast, right? And again, as you get older, the more mature you get, the harder you can throw, the more force you can produce, the more risk of injury we are asking if we're having to do a fast ramp up. So I do not like at all a short shutdown, from a 3 to 4 week shutdown or maybe even less, and then a short ramp up. The short ramp up is really the issue, not necessarily the short shutdown. But that ramp up has to be structured and we have to work back from when we need to get ready. And that's where I see a lot of our college athletes kind of run into trouble. And I do have something I want to discuss. Let's go ahead and move to the pro group here because we're going to discuss it here anyway. Again, the pro group is absolutely case by case, right? Because these guys are in all different areas. Maybe we have some starters that are in the minor leagues that are pitching, 150 innings. Maybe we have some relievers that are in the minor leagues that are only getting, 40 to 50 innings. Those are 2 drastically different scenarios. Maybe one of the guys started as a reliever, he got hurt, and then they re-ramped him back up, and then all of a sudden a couple of their starters got hurt and he needed to jump to be a starter role. So now they're asking him to extend his innings. And he went from, short innings to shutdown to re-ramp up to long innings. Things like that happen all the time. So it's so case by case in professional ball that a lot of these guys, you absolutely got to have a sit down. Let's look at what the time frame looks like. Let's look at what all the variables look like for you, and that way we can help set that plan for them. So one thing that some of them do is some of them only do what we call an active recovery. So some of them don't shut down from throwing at all. All right. So maybe you're a reliever that, you took between November and February to build up to get ready for spring training. You went to spring training and then you went to the season, and let's say that you threw 50 innings on the year, right? Well, you probably, including spring training games, you probably have less than 65, 70 innings on the year, which in professional ball, is not a lot, to be completely honest, right? So as a reliever, it might be a good amount, but when you're looking at high school and college, some of those guys are getting 75 to 100 plus innings a year. So when you get to pro ball, 50 innings a year is really not that much. So some of those guys might want to continue to throw to get more reps. Some of them finally started to figure out their timing and their delivery on the mound towards the end of the year, and they don't want to take time off because they don't want to lose that timing. Because again, at this point, when you're a professional athlete, it's your job, right? There's a guy right behind you trying to take your spot. So you can't take 3 months off and then try to come back and regain the timing. It's a very different ball game in professional ball than it is in high school. So those guys might do what we call an active recovery. So that could look a couple different things here. One of the ways that we have done an active recovery is we select 2 days, let's say a Tuesday and a Friday, just to stay on track with what we've been discussing. And we don't do any throwing at all on any day of the week except for Tuesday and Friday. And on those 2 days, let's say for 4 to 8 weeks, 1 to 2 months, or maybe longer depending on their time frame, they're just doing light catch, 45 to 60 feet, maybe up to 75 feet, super light intensity, all on an arc, all on a rainbow, with very, very, very little intensity put on the ball, right? So that would be what we would call an active recovery type of throwing there, right? So their main focus there is to keep the arm moving. That way it doesn't take as long to re-ramp up. Maybe another focus is they finally figured out a delivery thing with their back leg, or figured out a delivery thing with their arm action, and they don't want to shut down to lose that. So they take those 2 days a week to hit that quality, just to make sure that they can maintain that. All right, maybe it's the finger pressure on the ball. They figured out how to backspin the baseball better, and they just want to touch the ball twice a week to keep their hands on the seams. That way they can kind of feel what they finally figured out, and they don't want to lose that. So that's one way, is to play catch 2 to 3 really light days a week for 1 to 2, possibly up to 3 months, depending on their time frame. Another thing some of them do is they'll take the baseball out of their hand completely and do the exact same thing with something like a football, right? They might play light catch with a football, same thing 2 to 3 days a week. Very light intensity. They're not airing it out, 50, 60 yards. It's a, 15, 20 yard, just light catch with a partner, just, keeping the arm action smooth, keeping the intensity down, and just making sure that they're staying on track with the arm. That way it doesn't take as long to re-ramp up when they need to get ramped up. And then again, obviously there's other situations where guys are coming in with a little bit of an injury, or they're banged up a little bit after the season, and we are in a shutdown period, but then they actually ramp up a lot earlier than what the other guys would do, right? Maybe they shut down the last month or 2 months of the season, so they've already done their shutdown period, and now they actually want to slowly re-ramp up, a little bit earlier than the other guys. So that would be a different scenario with those pro athletes as well. But kind of moving forward, a couple things that I want to hit real quick is from a physical standpoint, like what happens physically in the body and the arm as you throw. And this is kind of what I alluded to earlier about the performance training, the arm care, the things like that, how to take care of your body. So obviously we're talking, again, pretty much all the ages here, but as you throw and as you pitch, there's a gradual loosening that's going to take place at the anterior part of the shoulder, and also in the medial elbow to an extent. So during games, as you go from the 3rd to the 4th to the 5th inning, or even, just over the course of a season. So as you throw, obviously, there's going to be some loosening that takes place from a joint standpoint. So a lot of times these pitchers are going to gain external rotation of their shoulder. So their humeral head is actually externally rotating backwards to help them get more layback in their throwing arm, right? So again, that's the loosening of the anterior part of the shoulder to be able to create more external rotation. Obviously, we know external rotation is a big component in throwing hard and high velocity. But what happens when you gain external rotation is you lose internal rotation. GERD, so glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. All that means is the glenohumeral joint, which is your shoulder joint, as you gain external rotation, you begin to lose internal rotation, which obviously the internal rotation is what happens as you come forward and you come into ball release. The humeral head is coming into internal rotation. So as we lose that, obviously, force has to be distributed to different places. So, days after the elbow extension, so as you go to extend your elbow, a day or two after, sometimes guys will actually lose elbow extension because all the musculature around the forearm is tightening and it doesn't want to get injured. So maybe there was a lot of stress that happened, in the game. Maybe there was a lot of stress that happened, over the course of a season, and we also begin to lose elbow extension. So now we've begun to lose internal rotation of the humeral head of the shoulder, and we've also begun to lose elbow extension of the arm. So, as you go into external rotation as you're throwing, the ball on the socket is going to glide forward. So the ball is going to externally rotate, but as it rotates backwards, it's also sliding forward into the joint. It's gliding forward anteriorly, right? So in a strong and prepared rotator cuff, it's going to work hard to prevent too much of that forward translation in the socket. So pretty much all that means is if your rotator cuff is strong, it's prepared, you've gone through different types of arm care, different types of strength and conditioning for the upper extremity, that rotator cuff is going to be prepared for that. And that rotator cuff works hard to hold the ball in the socket. That's the entire job of the rotator cuff, is to hold the ball in the socket. Don't let it move outside the socket. So again, as we throw and we get deeper into the season, the rotator cuff, as well as the scapular stabilizers around the shoulder blade, those are going to begin to get fatigued, right? So as we throw in a game, or as we throw deeper into the season, we're several months into the season, the cuff and the scapular stabilizers, they're going to get fatigued, and they can't prevent as much anterior glide of that ball in the socket. So if they're not as strong and they're not as prepared as they were early in the season, that ball in the socket is going to start to move more. When that ball moves more in the socket, obviously that's going to lead to more stress at the shoulder. And again, when that shoulder can't control that anterior glide of the ball in the socket, it's going to translate stress elsewhere, right? And that stress has to be absorbed by something. And that's going to move to, the bicep, the tricep, the forearm, and the elbow, right? So obviously that's a lot of times what happens, unfortunately, is when we get elbow injuries, a lot of times it's because the rotator cuff, the scapula stabilizers aren't prepared or are fatigued, and they can't prevent that ball from moving in the socket. When it does, again, it translates more force down the chain, and something has to take that stress. Well, obviously, that's why it's important to continue a well-structured strength and performance program year-round. So we're talking, if you're in our middle school age group from 10 years old to 13, 14 years old, or if you're in our high school, college, professional, if you are looking to be a high-level thrower, if you're looking to maximize your intensity as a pitcher, and you're looking to minimize injury risk, this is the reason that you have to be in a well-structured strength and performance program year-round. Because, the 3-4 months in the off-season that you did, your strength program, and you were in a quality performance program with the strength coach, you built the cuff capacity. You built the ability to prevent that ball from moving in the socket. And as you get deeper into the season, not only, if you have stopped training and if you have stopped doing strength and performance training in season, which unfortunately we're still seeing a lot of people do, if you stop doing that, well, that cuff is not being prepared as much. And the scapular stabilizers aren't being prepared as much. So again, if they're not prepared, and then you add on the amount of throwing and volume and the fatigue that's happening at the throwing arm, something is going to happen eventually, right? And that's unfortunate, and it happened to me even, and we see it a lot still. But that is the reason why people need to understand you need to continue a well-structured strength and performance program year-round. That way you can minimize injury risk and play at the highest level possible. And when I say strength and performance program, I love, resistance bands, J bands, and, things like that. I really think that those are great tools to microdose some strength, around the rotator cuff, around the forearm, around that area. I believe that is a good tool to microdose, some strength in that area. But if you're a high-level thrower, if you're in high school, if you're throwing, 80-plus miles an hour, a 10-pound resistance band is not going to be enough stimulus on that musculature to be able to prevent that ball from moving still, right? You have to be strong. There has to be more force, right? If you're throwing an 88, 92-mile-an-hour fastball, there's a whole lot more force happening than what a 10-pound resistance band or even body weight exercises can prevent, right? You have to be in a well-structured strength and performance program year-round if you want to minimize injury risk and play at the highest possible level that you can for a long time. So that's the main thing, obviously, I want to hit there, because unfortunately that's still misunderstood. People still don't understand that. And I think that this is a really valuable area for people to start to understand and realize this is the reason why this needs to happen if you are looking to play at the higher level. So kind of moving forward here, very often we are seeing high-level arms getting sidelined because of undetected low-grade injuries that happen when they were younger, right? So sometimes, they were never really given enough time off or relative strength in that area to allow it to fully heal. So, when we're younger, we're 13 years old, we're playing on a weekend, we're trying to win the weekend tournament. We might pitch on Friday and then, throw 4 innings, and we might have to turn around and pitch on a championship game on Sunday with 1 day rest, and throw 7 innings, right? But not only is that aggressive, we're also probably playing, shortstop or right field or catcher or something. So we're still throwing a lot, between that. So when that happens, and when we're not physically prepared in the shoulder and the body for that reason, we're not ready to prevent, a lot of stress from going to that joint. So we're going to get fatigued, and all the reasons we hit earlier, that's what's going to happen. And there's going to be, little low grade injuries that are going to happen when you're younger. And a lot of times those are undetected, right? Unless you have a really, really good, physician that's looking at an MRI super in depth, a lot of those injuries are going undetected, right? Because they're low grade, they're not a big deal. They get the typical, hey, take 2 to 6 weeks off, don't throw. Here's the Throwers 10 program, do these exercises, do this stuff at home, right? And again, that is not going to take care of it long term. Yes, it might put a Band-Aid on it short term. The pain might go away, but a lot of those high level arms, as they get older and as they learn to produce more force and they throw harder, they're getting injured and they're getting sidelined because of those low grade undetected injuries that happen when they were younger, right? So kind of moving forward, this is the classic case of like a junior or senior in high school, or even like a freshman in college that, is a good quality athlete. Maybe they're, mid to upper 80s already. They throw pretty hard for their age. They're kind of the dude. They go into college, or they're a junior and senior, and they join like a quality strength and performance program, and they begin to gain strength, and they begin to gain, they begin to clean up their movement patterns, and they gain movement efficiency both, in the weight room biomechanically, but also on the mound, right? So they're gaining strength, they're learning to move better, maybe they're even adding body weight. And then that athlete, in just a short period, it might go from, let's say, 87 miles an hour to 93 miles an hour just in a few months, 4 to 6 months, let's say, just because he's been preparing and training his body correctly. Well, again, as we kind of talked about, now he's producing more force that he wasn't able to do before. And that undetected low-grade injury from when he was younger that was never fully taken care of, now, unfortunately, an injury happens. An injury occurs because that low-grade undetected injury from when they were younger was never fully taken care of by rest and strength around that area. And as they gain strength when they get older, and they gain a movement efficiency when they get older, they begin to throw harder. Obviously, to throw hard, you need more force. And when that force happens on a low-grade injury, that's where injury occurs. And unfortunately, you see that quite a lot when athletes begin to increase their strength and throwing velocity just because of a previous injury when they were younger that may or may not have even been like a huge injury. It just never really got taken care of fully. So, this goes back to managing the volume and intensity and stress levels from when they were younger, right? And that is exactly why we do what we do at Base Sports Performance and Base Pitching. That's why we do what we do. We take our 10-year-olds in middle school all the way up through, we've got like a 29-year-old in professional ball. We take all of these athletes through the volume and the intensity and the stress level management. And that's our job as strength, performance, and, pitching coaches. Is our job is to help you understand what it is that you need from a timeline standpoint, what it is that you individually need, to prepare and get ready for the future. So, just in summary on the question of, should you take time off? Obviously, it's case by case. I want to make sure that that's very clear. It's case by case. These are my general recommendations. But, if you're 14 years old and younger, take 3 to 4 months off from throwing, from swinging, go play other sports, build and develop athletic qualities, in other sports. If you're in high school, 15 to 18, 15 to 19, generally 3 to 6 weeks off. In college, obviously, it's going to depend on the schedule as we determine. And then our pro athletes, a lot of them are doing active recovery, but obviously that's going to depend as well. So one thing I want to kind of end with, just to clarify again, no matter what age you are, what bucket you fall into here, between 10 and 28, 29 years old, all of these athletes, if you are looking to actually pitch at a high level and you want to minimize injury risk, should be in a year-round high performance program. So obviously that's what we offer and that's what we do. Obviously I'm very passionate about this because this is something that I did not have access to, and this is something that definitely would have helped me stay away from injury, but also maximize my potential on the mound as an athlete. So obviously if you're interested in training with us, even if you live far away and you need help, shoot us an email, shoot us a text. We would love to help you. We would love to get you set up, on an individualized plan for you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So if you like this podcast, please share it. Obviously, that's how we get this message out, and so we can help many, many athletes and parents kind of with their direction of what do we need to do? Should we take time off? Should we not? What do we need to be doing? What do we need to be focusing on? So please share it. Please send it to a friend. That's how we grow this thing. So if you have any questions in the meantime, shoot us a text, shoot us an email. We'd love to help. Until we talk to you in the next podcast, have a great day.